Sista Culcha is significant in the history of sound system culture in the UK because she led what many acknowledge as the first female sound system in the early 1980s. As a selector, we heard her Guyanese and eclectic Black British musical heritage and listened to her ethical approach to DJing that used counter lyrics to challenge the misogyny, homophobia, and paedophilia that was and is sometimes found in reggae dancehall.
In terms of sound system, I visited the Black Women's Centre in Brixton, and there were a group of young women there who had a sound system called Sista Culcha. I spoke with them, listened to them, and I said to them, I have loads of records, and I've been DJing since school. This was, I think, 1980. They started doing a few gigs, and I'd go along with them and things, you know what I mean? So they had their selectors, people chatting on the mic, just doing their thing really, But the equipment belonged to the guys, friends of theirs. I thought it was quite interesting really, the guys were there to help them and things, carrying boxes, blah, blah, blah. I think from that, I kind of got involved, Out of, I think, the 4 or 5 of them that were involved, they started leaving to go off and pursue other things, you know what I mean? So there was myself and another who were left there for maybe been a year or so. She was the original Sista Culcha. At the time, my thing was listening to the lyrics in particular, which were coming predominantly from Jamaica. Apart from some of the lyrics which were informative, showing us what was happening to the everyday people in Jamaica, a lot of it was just very sexist and very, very derogatory to women, And I mean, all right, there might be an element of that in calypso or soca, right? However, in calypso or soca, there's more tongue-in-cheek. You know what I mean? It's basically ribbing somebody, or it'll be a social comment. And coming from a totally different culture, it was like trying to understand where, as a black female living in London, who loved music, who has a lot of energy, would fit in. Because obviously sound systems, it's a male bastion. Going to the record shops was something else completely, you know what I mean, And people kind of look to you weird, like, you want to play a sound system for, you know what I mean, why do you want to do this, And because it's there to be done. For me, that's where the sound system started, but my love for music goes back from the cradle. Coming from Guyana at that time, when I first became aware of music, was on many, many, many different levels. But we'd listen to Radio Berbice, and so I'd listen to things like all the great American singers, Nat King Cole, Sam Cooke. As a little kid in the hot sun, feeling the sun in your skin, and just sitting or standing and just listening. I found music very emotive. I didn't know what the words meant, but the way the words married the whole music and the whole construction of it just used to make me feel kind of woozy, you know what I mean? It was more of a sensation than, oh, I love this, I must dance to this, you know what I mean? Yeah? And I remember, for me, there are lots of music that I can tell you specifically where I was when I first heard that track, how it made me feel. I find it very, very poignant. On top of that, I have an uncle who they call Paul Whiteman. Now, I didn't know until years later that Paul Whiteman is actually an American musician. His name was George Halley, but they called him Paul Whiteman. Now, Paul Whiteman would lead the singing at festivals. So it would be a wedding festival, the festival preceding the wedding, and they'd be cooking. They'd cook outside, women, things would cook outside, and we'd all gather. And because I was, the children weren't babysat. We all came to the gatherings. There were family occasions, and it was amazing because, they wouldn't have probably a guitar or something like that, yeah, and something that they would bang on. They would just sing and dance and and laugh. And for instance, one of the things they used to sing was, it's called Kwekwe. That goes like this. Sanko likim loba pande dam, gala hala murder. Sanko likim loba pande dam, gala hala murder. Brip brap police come, gala hala murder. So that was my culture. Do you know what I mean? But there was none of that when I came to England. I was basically usurped into a lower middle class British culture, in that I lived in Enoch Powell's constituency in a nice house. Well, we had lots of luxuries, but it was a nice house. I went to ballet, I went to tap, I went to piano lessons. So I learned lots of English folk music. I learned classical music through ballet. I learned jazz through tap. Just another set of folk music from, and obviously church music, which plays a big part by going to the local Anglican school, Church of England's church. And so those things have influences. I've never, ever, ever had that Pentecostal getting in the spirit. But when I hear music, for instance, Shaka, that's as near as it gets. I've nearly been taken out of my head. And I don't know what element of the music did that to me, because I'm quite a controlled individual. I can be quite happy and loud and leery and all the rest of it, but I'm quite a controlled individual. But for that to happen, it was like, woo! So music has been like that underbelly. And when I came to England, being in this country as a person whose culture, like I said, was usurped, as far as I'm concerned, I had to be a chameleon to survive in this country, because we had the whole Enoch Powell thing going on with the skinheads attacking us on the street, and the racism at school, just a lack of identity. However, what I really respected were the Jamaicans who were not basically allowing that to happen. Again, there was a bit of a culture clash there, because as far as they were concerned, everybody else who were not Jamaicans were Small Island. No, I don't come from an island. It was like you had to become a Jamaican. Again, another chameleon. In our house, we'd listen to from Tom Jones, Engelbert Humperdinck, all the classics from North America. Then on a Sunday, once in a while, my mum and dad would take out a little reel-to-reel. So we had that along with the Blue Spot, which one we bought. And I suppose as a 9-year-old, I was the right height to put the records into the Blue Spot. So there you were with the Dr. Bird and Blue Beat and all those kind of ska rhythms and things, Lady with the red dress on. Loads of parties at our house. Our house was like party central. There was always music of some kind around, And then I discovered that my parents both could sing really well. Now, my dad's name is Donald. So my mum called him Danny, He would sing Danny Boy, that was his signature. My mum can sing. My mum is quite a quiet person, a very, very, very conservative and very reserved individual. Where she got us from, I don't know. We like chalk and cheese. If she wants to have a communication with you, she say, Dawn, come, sit down. You don't stand up and talk to my mum in front of her. That's rude. So she has very Victorian values. Even if she's angry with you, she doesn't raise her voice and carry on leering, Anyway, this woman then tells me that she used to sing live over the air in Guyana. As you can hear, I've got quite a husky voice, and always have done from a kid. My mum reckons I'm tone deaf, I can't sing, and because I couldn't sing, but I understood music, that was like my musical intelligence, as it were. So I started playing music at school. I started DJing at school. They made me a prefect in the 5th years, I think it was, and I hated being out in the cold. So I got my favourite teachers, told them what I intended to do, because I was always getting records and things, I decided to have penny disco and told the school I'd give them the money for the school fund. They had this very noisy PA system with one deck which sat on about 2 feet off the ground. And so I used to bring the records to school, and those little 45 cases. The white kids would bring their Gary Glitter. I'd encourage them to bring their records, The Jamaican kids would bring their reggae records. I'll get some reggae records from next door. And I was the Motown person, either Motown or Northern Soul. On the first penny disco, I think I made something like £4. So that meant there was 400 kids in my disco. We'd go to a place called St. Giles, a Church of England youth club between Camberwell and Peckham, You'd have the big sound systems come down, Coxon, Sir Furnaby, you name all the South London sets would come down on a Friday night. They would put on Fensick and the girls would go mad. But the lyrics were very offensive to young women, you know what I mean? Basically, it says, I tried so hard just to make her satisfied. But no matter how hard I try, she is still unsatisfied. Where did the chick? She must be sick. She must be want a Fensick. Now, for those who don't know what a Fensick is just basically like a paracetamol. She needs a pill to make her satisfied better, So we used to counteract that by saying, where do the guy? He must be shy. He must want a cool pie, And so it was basically that was kind of counteracting a cut after cut. You make one cut, I'll make another cut kind of thing, It was those kind of like little gimmicks that I was about really. So you didn't have time to chat a whole lyric, but you'd make a little infliction to let people know you weren't happy with that particular track. Sometimes people may have thought I was a bit too radical. And I've never seen myself as being radical. I've just seen myself as, I think sometimes for me, things are just organic. It just feels right. I was a soul head because soul just had that, the melodies, the harmonies, whereas some reggae music, especially like music for the dance hall, is very raw. But it was in its rawness, that's what makes it, because they weren't trying to make things nice, especially like Big Youth. When Big Youth says, every nigger is a star, now nigger is a word that we all hate. He was the first person to be using it in a way like these young people are trying now to use it, yeah? And which says, I might be a nigger, but I'm a star. You understand me, yeah? And it was a time where we were doing, the Black Power salute and all the rest of it, trying to connect with something, but most of our connections, again, were looking outside of our own existence to like North America and also to some aspects of the Caribbean, which was predominantly Jamaica through the music. So we saw things through other people's eyes as opposed to our own eyes until people like Matumbi and the Lovers Rock era over here. But later in the 80s and 90s, there was a big emergence of that, with people like Smiley Culture who actually made it. For me, the next natural progression from that, being a writer, a poet, a storyteller, a mic chanter, as we used to call them days, take it to the youth club, because I was also a youth worker, and to show the young people how to write lyrics which didn't have those negative images, whether it was sexist, whether it was homophobic, whether it was about not seeing themselves. So it wasn't just black kids or white kids. I had a little mobile music unit, and I'll take it to the club, set up the decks, teach them to scratch, teach them to DJ, and also teach them to write lyrics and how to chat on the mic, how to, like microphone technique basically, how to present what they had produced. I became a member of Artists Against Apartheid. So I was one of the DJs who DJed at Clapham Common for Nelson Mandela's birthday party, that big party that was there. I met a number of people from the ANC because I've DJed at functions to raise money, raise awareness when Nelson and Walter Sisulu, Oliver Tambo and those people were incarcerated, met their wives, supported the miners when they came down, and Scargill, who was the wife of Arthur Scargill, that's it, the miners' union, So many things really, So many places played, Fulham Palace, Chatsworth House in Derbyshire, all over the place. Then I had with me Lorna G, who sings Gotta Find a Way, Burning Illusion. One of the young women from there was actually one of our writers, a Black Ink, Judith Ellis. She was in Burning Illusion. She and her sister, they sang, and kind of sing Jade. because at that point, coming from the raw MCing, it became more of a sing-J, so it's between singing and DJing, and people kind of like that, so they did one called Rio de Janeiro Blues by Randy Crawford. What I actually love about reggae music is the fact that you can hear a soul record or a country and western record or a record that is a pop record, and they just put a reggae beat behind it. The singing may not be absolutely brilliant, but with that reggae beat, it just changes it completely. I've done a tribute to John Holt recently, and one of the things that I included in that was Jamaica Farewell. Now, that was done by Roger Whittaker. You listen to his version, and then listen to Sir John Holt's version with the orchestration behind it. They're so poles apart. And you would never believe that Roger Whittaker, with his folk version, was the original. They have a saying in Jamaica, music at the beat of your heart. That resonates with me on so many levels. In this country, what I found is that because we had to hold on to our culture so much, we tried not to let too much others in. And that's what was, for me, was very limiting and restricted with men playing sound systems. Yeah? Back in the day, men used to skank out, yeah? But in the main, you go to a dance, you see the men, they hold a little drink, they have their smoke, whatever they're doing, and they'd be rocking from side to side. Women tended to more dance. If I'm going into a dance, then who am I entertaining? As a dancer, I like to dance. I was a skanker, yeah? I would take out all the guys and beat them because I could dance. 8 years classical ballet, so I could pirouette, I could do all kind of things, you know what I mean, yeah? Watching Michael Jackson dance, those kind of things. So I knew when I went to a reggae dance, as a soul head, I could do those northern soul moves, drop back, drop forwards, all that kind of madness, you understand me? As a young person, I felt very free, because like I said, I was not restricted by any of these boxes. And I think, again, not coming from London, so I didn't have like, say, okay, this is my group of friends. I was a lone soldier. I got to dance by myself. But I was not backwards in coming forwards. And if I heard a track, I would dance. Now, a lot of these guys, like I said, would play, especially if there were 2 or 3 sound systems in the room that come with their specials, their dub plates. And all they'd be trying to do was trying to downcry the next sound, you know what I mean? Like, my sound is the best sound. I didn't come to hear that your sound is the best sound. I came to hear music. I came to be entertained. So a lot of that really was very macho posturing. On a level, it was very entertaining and fun, but it wasn't a dance. It was a sound clash. There's a difference. When we went back to play music, to entertain people, we went because people paid their money to be entertained. It was a blend between the disco, playing one track after the next. Part of the learning process was learning visually and setting your boxes. So you knew, well, okay, this is my reggae selection. This is my soul selection. This is my middle of the road kind of, disco type thing, like the Chaka Khan's. I'm every woman. It's an anthem for the girls, isn't it? You know what I mean? So you knew that people would come specifically to listen to you. This is where my guilty secrets come about. Because dance all is alluring. Some of the rhythms, some of those guys are very, very clever, because everything started becoming digital then. Because before that, the musicians would all go into the studio, do their one take, and that was it, So we had people like Buju Banton, Beanie Man, obviously Beanie had been there for years and still there. We had Shabba. There was definitely a conflict. There was some that I could get away with playing. It was hard work, because rather than just go into the shop and say, okay, what pre-releases have you got this week? They'd probably give me the latest 30 they had that week. Expensive hobby. You'd have to censor what you're doing, and there was a lot of censorship going on, you know what I mean? I mean, one of the most controversial records it was about was Boom Bye Bye. I mean, it wasn't even a dancehall record, really, you know what I mean? It was just raw homophobia. It was something that I wasn't trying to promote. And also, it's like having an open and honest discussion, not just about lifestyles. I mean, a lot of people lie about, this never existed before, this, the white man, them, and blah, 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 blah. It's a fact. It is there, you understand me, yeah? And the more you try to deny it, but the thing is, it wasn't even that. It was like the way, it was about murdering people because of their choices. To me, I couldn't be promoting that, no way, no how, because I think we have it hard enough in our societies than to be killing each other for every little thing, and especially because, you don't agree with my sexuality or somebody else's sexuality. I did a workshop at Yasanti Art Center. And the reason I'm bringing this up is like there was a big controversy with me and the people who ran Yasanti. And although I have a lot of respect for them, I think I do understand where they were coming from in the end, you know what I mean? But what happened is that I'd done the workshop, and then they had various poets and things on, and then they had an open mic. Now, I'd written this track called Child Molester, and I hadn't quite finished it, but I wanted to present it because at that point, everywhere I was turning, if I spoke to 10 women in a week, 6 of those would be telling me that they had been sexually abused. And I'm not just talking white women, black women, I'm talking women across the board, Asian women, it was just everywhere. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm really pleased that those people feel open enough to share that information with me. But where could I go? So I created a scenario that basically went, molester, child molester, come help me. Molester, child molester, me book him in a dance in a Leicestershire. Me ask him where him come from, Manchester. When me take a stock, it was Market Harbour, because Market Harbour is a prison, you know what I mean, yeah? And then basically it concludes, he met this woman in a dance, yeah? Then at the end of it, like she has, it says, he troubled her son and her daughter, because obviously men were saying the same thing, that they had been sexually abused, you know what I mean, by men in their family, stepfathers, whoever was around, you know what I mean. And basically Kakulu said like she didn't take no time with them, sharp knife, chop off him neck, it would have justified murder, police throw down and take away the chopper, big court case, it was a big headline, and then went on to the chorus again. Now, when I started chatting that lyrics, they cut the music, they cut the sound, and went to a break. But I think it was just too controversial. If we continue hiding, our faults as people, and I'm not talking about any particular colour, I'm just talking about hiding our faults, you know what I mean? Oh, this can't happen, this doesn't happen, blah, blah, blah. It will continue to happen, because that's the nature of secrets and lies and silence. It wasn't well received, to say the least, you know what I mean? But it didn't stop me from doing it in my poetry sessions with like people like Apples and Snakes, because that was a totally different platform. So from the dancehall thing to what I was trying to do, there was a lot of soul searching. One of the people who I brought very few of, he slipped in now and then because of the guys in the record shop, would be Ninja Man. Because he was just too gangster for me. Way, way, way too gangster, Scarily so. Some of it, again, like I said, I couldn't really criticize because it was like a social comment. However, going back to a lack of paternal support within the home, young men in particular being murdered on a day-to-day basis in some parts of the capital in particular. And to know that a lot of these DJs were coming from those same streets and had to be walking around unlicensed guns. But they knew that if they were caught, they knew the consequences of it, you know what I mean? Having so-called made it in the music industry, but still having to use drugs as a currency, as it were, you know what I mean? Now, a lot of those things, obviously, I've never been in that kind of environment or impoverished situation to say, well, okay, to take a moral high ground. And although I don't like drugs, and although I don't like violence, and I don't like guns, to some extent, I could understand why those things all went hand in hand, you understand me? So it wasn't so... Again, I'm not trying to politicize everything about the music and the dancehall, but I think everything is relative. If there wasn't that kind of abject poverty, they wouldn't be writing about the things that they are writing about. The other side of that were women emerging like Lady Soul, Patra, and a few others who were basically now using their sexuality as their currency. And yes, they were challenging the guys how do you reconcile it? Well, these women, this is their currency. My mum didn't teach us that we had to use our sexuality as our currency. Our currency was to be educated, to be articulate, to work hard. But then, like I said, I'm in a privileged position. It could all sound very highbrow, my saying it on the one hand, but like I said, it's not my experience, But even now, just listening to some music yesterday, the way they want to objectify women, and women are allowing that to happen, and also objectifying themselves, I find it offensive, so offensive. Being a woman myself, just loving who I am as a person, and knowing that there are alternatives. You can come from the ghetto, but you don't have to be of the ghetto. How do we break those negative cycles? Because the music, the rhythms are amazing, but you cannot. It's not elevating our society. Yeah. And I think subconsciously, for me, I want to see us do better. Like I said, my son is Mr. Sui. I started him DJing when he was about 9 years old. He also understands music. He used to build rhythm tracks. He is more of your house and your garage type person. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I had to tell him that when you're playing music, you play for the ladies. You play for the ladies, you get a lady following, then the guys will come, and it'll be a different element of young men. They're going to come, they're going to want to spend money, they want to impress the girls. And I think he's finally got the message, within the last 10 years or so, because like he's been DJing now for, God, I did have to say all of his life, really, all of his life, But he's taken it to a totally different level to myself. He isn't so much involved in the politics of things. I think he'll say to me, have you heard this person, blah, blah, blah. He'll bring music for me to listen to. And that's good because that legacy, like you say, it carries on. And it's lovely to see that sometimes he'll say to me, oh, Mum, come and do my door for me. So I'll go off and I'll do his door for him. And, as people coming in, I was like, it's my mum, this is Sista Culcha, blah, blah, blah. They go, Sista Culcha, boy, yeah. So he tells a lot about you, I mean? You're the one who started off, because most of the guys will boast about their dads or their uncles having sound systems. Now for him, I think he's quite brave to go tell people that his mum taught him to DJ and his mum had a sound system. You know what I mean? His mum was the DJ. Even now, he wants me to go on DJ in his radio station. We'll see.
In Sonic Vibrations, Sista Culcha's pioneering influence on other female-led sound systems and sound women is celebrated in Sisters in Sound, a conversation on lovers rock and sound system culture, and by her peers in Zinga Sounds in their oral history interview. Sista Culcha also set the mold for new and emerging female-led sound systems such as Legs 11, as featured in Yasmin Foster's commentary, 1000 Volts of Lullabies.